I see a lot of topics out there about what to do to prep for a flight. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about what I do in the first hour of a flight that I find really helpful to prep you for the entire flight. These are things that you can do either on a short flight or a long flight. Of course, if it's super short, you might only have an entire hour in the air. So maybe these are a little bit more geared towards long haul flights. Either way, they're things that I do once I get on the airplane that I think are really helpful to make sure that I'm comfortable, the people around me are comfortable, and I'm as rested as I can be when I land at my destination. So, the first thing I do when I get on the plane is I greet the flight attendants. I always say, hello, how are you? Depending on when you board, I find a lot of times just ask them where they're from or what number flight they're on. Not always, the case for long hauls. It's their one flight, but if you're on a shorter flight, they've maybe already been on a couple planes that day. So all that to say, I just try to be nice and friendly and get to know them a little bit. They are people. I think they get overlooked and underappreciated a lot for what they do. So that's the first thing I do. I always greet my flight attendants. The second thing I do is once I've found my seat, I I should have already made sure I had everything, but I always do a quick double check, make sure there's nothing that I haven't forgotten, just a mental check, and I quickly get my bag up in the bin. One thing I do before I do that I think a lot of people wait till the last minute to do is as I'm walking to my seat, I am looking at the overhead bins and I am checking to see what style plane I'm on. Older aircraft, you usually lay your bag. So, like, if this is your roller bag, you usually lay it like flat, which is not very efficient because the bins weren't super tall on older planes. Now, a lot of times, if this is your bag, you set it this way. So it's like up on the short end. That was a really, really bad description. I should have brought a suitcase. I hadn't planned on necessarily talking about that. But I always make sure as I'm walking down the aisle of the plane to find my seat that I know which way my bag's gonna go because it just is, believe it or not, it's seconds, but those seconds add up to help everybody board faster. You don't have flight attendants telling you to change it. They don't have to come by and change your bag. It's just up, done. The next thing I do is, if I haven't already, just to be able to get my bag up overhead, I make sure everything is at my seat again that I need. I know I sound like a broken record. I check things multiple times, but it's always best to, as they say in woodworking, for example, to measure twice, cut once. Always, always double check yourself. It makes life so much easier. I've had occasions where plans have changed once I got on the plane, and then I was that person who was standing up and being in the way. I try my best not to do that. So the next thing I do, like I said, is make sure I have everything at my seat. I usually am in one of the maybe first to middle boarding groups somewhere in there, depending on where I'm flying. Not usually the first. I should correct that. Very rarely. But I'm usually one of the earlier groups to board. So I have a little bit of time. Nobody's by me. I make sure all my stuff is together. And then I make sure that it's under my seat and ready to go. If it's a long haul flight, usually you'll find things at your seat like a water bottle, a pillow, a blanket, a headset. Depends on the airline. They're all going to put different stuff there. That stuff, quite frankly, is very obnoxious. It is in the way as you're trying to sit down. And that's probably the next thing I do after make sure everything's on my seat is I move all that stuff. I'm like, get out of my way. I have people who are going to be coming to sit down next to me. I don't want to be like elbowing them and getting in their way and or having to try to do this as I'm like staying in my zone, which is a very small zone on an airplane. So all that stuff gets moved. It gets moved to a seat back pocket because if I forget it, it doesn't matter. Mine's not going with me anyway. It's one of the few times you should and can and really should use your seat back pocket. Um, if there's something I want unwrapped, like the blanket, I will unwrap my blanket and get situated with that on my lap. Seatbelt over the blanket always. Will save you a headache later and the flight attendants later. But anyway, I unwrap things because I don't want to be that person who's like rustling and making noise as people are trying to like function and be, you know, do their own thing. It's also gives you the opportunity that when the flight attendant comes by, you can immediately throw that trash away and helps keep the plane clean. Keeps less stuff at your seat. So what's the next thing I do? I get everything organized. The pillow goes wherever, the blanket goes on and over, and After that, then I make sure that anything I may or may not want out of my bag is out of my bag. And I do that because when someone sits down next to me, the tiny space, I mean, these seats, for those of us that fly in peasant class, are narrower than my ottoman here. By a lot, by probably that much. It's a guesstimate, and I kind of want to measure it, but I digress. Anyway, I get all the stuff out that I need because let's be realistic. Once someone is sitting next to you and once you're seated, it is very hard to reach for something under your seat and get it out of your bag, and especially depending on the size of bag you have. If you're traveling with a smaller bag, you bring it up on your lap, easy peasy. If you are reaching under to get something out of your bag and it's like a legit backpack and it's stuffed to the gills, because let's be realistic, nobody wants to check a bag these days, or especially pay to check a bag. That's a lot harder to get stuff out of. And again, I don't want to be bumping the seat in front of me and disturbing that passenger. I don't want to be potentially elbowing the person next to me. My legs may need to get out of the way to pull the bag up, and I don't want to bug the person next to me. Okay, there's a theme here. I'm trying to be respectful of my fellow passengers. I find it to be such a huge thing. So I get everything out that I need, and that includes electronic devices. It includes charge cords, all that kind of stuff is accessible. And after that, and we're really ready to go, and we're in the air, gosh, probably the first thing I do once we're in the air is like I get stuff plugged in if I need it plugged in. You shouldn't have it plugged in when you're taxiing or FYI, but flight attendants will tell you that. I get everything plugged in if I need it plugged in. I get ready for the in-flight service, which I know that will be coming by pretty quick, especially if you're on an evening international flight. You come by, you get a drink, you get your food. So try to make sure everything's just like ready to go for that. I know it's crazy, but I'm always thinking ahead. That's a huge thing that everybody should do on a flight. Always think ahead, especially if you're like old hat at this and this isn't your first flight. You should know what's coming. There's a routine. They're all pretty darn cookie cutter on planes. So making sure that everything is like ready to eat, or drink, or whatever service it happens to be. Still within the first hour of that flight. Once all the in-flight meal and beverage services come by, again, I make sure that everything's stacked and ready for them to take. I make sure any trash I have is out. And then I get ready to relax and go to bed. I'm a huge sleeper on flights. It's like putting a baby in a car. You put me on an airplane and I fall asleep. There have been times where I've just missed the meal. I've missed everything that was included in my ticket because I fell asleep for the entire flight. Believe it or not, that's actually really annoying because I do like to have at least one meal while on a plane since I did pay for it. I digress. So once the in-flight service has been cleared, I get ready for bed. I make sure I've got my pillow out and prepped, depending on the pillow I took with me. Sometimes that's already been connected. I have one that connects to the headrest, so it holds my head in place with an eye mask. Love it. Swear by it. I should do a very much unsponsored review, recommendation of it. Absolutely love it. Best $20 I ever spent on travel gear. But anyway, I get ready to sleep. So I've got all of that set up. And again, trying to stay out of everybody's way. Trying to not disturb the person next to me and just get ready for that. And getting ready for that is knowing that if I am going to sleep, if there's anything that I can consolidate and put away, I do it. I try not to lose things on planes. I know I have at least once. I don't roll my eyes at that because it was stupid of me. But that's the next thing I do. I just make sure everything's together. And by then, it's been about an hour into the flight, and then that's kind of my routine. So it's the things that I do, and I find them just to be super necessary and really helpful to make things calm. And who knows? That's what I do. It works for me. It might not be helpful for you. You may think this was the most ridiculous video you've ever watched, and you probably didn't even make it to this point because most people don't on my videos. But again, I digress. So I will stop rambling and being a little bit salty. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.